After the interview, either I would hear either the recruiter would not respond or they would tell me, oh, this job is not available anymore or you don't have enough experience, right? And I was starting to, I got a few, I did startup. And as you know, like UX is so much work. But most of the work by that time was very intense but unpaid and harder to get by too because there were a lot more applicants. And just getting that experience also was becoming hard for me. And by that time, I had been out of the job market for a while. And that's when I felt like, no, I think it's time for me to return to at least my day job. And then I did my startup UX work part-time for a bit with that. But eventually the demand caught up with me along with my job.
Hello and welcome to UX Transitions. I'm Robert Crane. In this podcast, we talk with a guest who left UX to return to her previous career. She graduated with distinction in civil engineering, studied medieval art and architecture for a year at the University of Oxford, worked as a structural engineer for several years, transitioned to UX design, and eventually returned to her previous career. From Ontario, Canada, welcome Sahar Sajjad. You studied medieval art and architecture at the University of Oxford. What prompted you to explore this field of study?
Honestly, my interest in general on what dictates the built environment. At that time, I was in engineering, but I really wanted to understand how over time the progress of material, the transition with spaces. And I found this opportunity where we would explore medieval art and architecture by actually going to the remote areas within UK. And I thought that was such an interesting way to kind of understand the history of the built environment, how we came about it.
I know that you also illustrate and you have a very distinctive style. Is illustrating an escape for you, or do both worlds complement each other? And most important, what role does UX play in this?
So I think illustration is what actually led me to UX. I started illustrating while I was in school just to kind of as an escape out of my head because I was doing intense calculations all the time. And then over time, I realized that, I loved bringing ideas to life visually. And one of the coolest things was to see the impact it had on other people, how they perceived it, what they liked, what they disliked. I loved hearing about that. And as I was doing more of that, I was also talking to some of my seniors. And I came across them telling me about UX design. Like, I'll sketch up this idea, how we can present it. And that was kind of a very good mix of what I was studying in school, like more logical calculation thinking. But then I was able to visually represent. I was able to think about the end user. With civil engineering and engineering, at least for the built environment, we try to focus it on calculations and logic so it is safe. Our goal is it to be safe, right? We are not particularly thinking about the end user while designing a bridge. So for me, I think that was what was missing. And then when I was doing illustration in my own time or I was talking to other people, I was really enjoying that. And that is when I learned about UX, it instantly fascinated me. So I think, kind of having both interest in like logical system thinking, but also like bringing ideas to life visually and being creative with it. I think the intersection of that is kind of what led me to UX.
So, on that point, what were your expectations about UX? And was there anything or anyone that influenced those expectations?
So because I was talking to some of the people in my program that were doing UX, I understood their work environment. I know it would be fast paced and, constantly changing because highly driven by the technology. So I was expecting all of those things. But, when I actually started learning it, I really understood, difference between research and then UX design versus UI. That's when I really got in depth. But I knew it is a field that would basically force me to constantly learn. And as challenging as that sounds, it is very exciting for me. So that is what I liked about it.
And you completed successfully the UX Bootcamp. When you look back, what were the highs and lows of that experience?
Highs, one of the things that really I appreciated and loved was the UX community. So, first, having access to mentors like yourself or even other in general UX mentors was something I was not used to, and have someone guide you through and kind of tell you, I thought was such an empowering experience. And then UX community in general is also very like helpful. People were quick to share resources, critique each other's work. And I think in a field like UX, that is what basically helps you grow. So I found that very exciting. Another high was I got an opportunity to work with a small business and then do some also industry related project. I did not think I would be able to do that in a boot camp, but some of the alumni that I was in touch with were encouraging me to do that. And being able to work on those external projects, I think was also something I really valued. The lows, the lows were that first of all, it is very intense because you're learning software, you're learning the core design, and it's all in a very short period of time. But at the same time, you also have to be intensely networking to get these opportunities, then create a portfolio and everything. So I think one thing was it was overwhelming. And then another low slightly would be the my timing of it. So I studied kind of at the tail end of COVID. I feel like before that, a lot of people were easily able to transition. Uh, but by the time I was starting studying, I could already hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, there are layoffs happening. It's hard." And at that time, I started to wonder, was this the correct time? I'm putting in so much work, and at the end of the day, boot camp, you get what you put in it. And because I was trying my best and trying to do a lot, but at the same time, I was getting demotivated by the environment. So, and external factors. So I would say that kind of was a bit of a low.
You were active within UX. What kept you going during that time? And what was the moment that you thought, this is just not going to work for me?
It was a bit of a gamble between what I was hearing and even my own experience of it versus how much I was enjoying it. Like I was truly, really like to this day, even just playing on Figma and Webflow, like that is a time I value. But eventually I started noticing that when I was getting interviews, I would get the first interview easy, but then after the interview, either the recruiter would not respond or they would tell me, oh, this job is not available anymore or you don't have enough experience, right? And I was I did startup. I worked with them. And as you know, like UX is so much work, but most of the work by that time was very intense but unpaid and harder to get by too because there were a lot more applicants. And just getting that experience also was becoming hard for me. And by that time, I had been out of the job market for a while, and that's when I felt like, no, I think it's time for me to return to at least my day job. And then I did my startup UX work part time for a bit with that. But eventually the demand caught up with me along with my job.
And after you made that decision, because of course you spent a good amount of time into this whole UX journey, how did it make you feel? And what was the reaction of your environment?
I think my environment was understanding, but myself, I would have to say I was a little sad because mentally I was very, prepared to jump into UX, even if it meant starting from like intern level, very basic job. I was prepared for that. But when I took up my engineering job, I knew that, this would have to take a backseat. So or at least it would take longer. I didn't really give up on it. But yeah, that's what made me a little sad that, like I was very much ready. I was ready to go, get in and kind of start from scratch. But now that it didn't work out, I need like a plan B and how to kind of tackle that.
And you're now working again as a structural engineer.
Mhm.
Would you have decided differently if the circumstances had been better, or do you think that at a certain point in time it would have ended anyway?
I think I would have given that sometimes because I have been in structural for 5 years. I love my field, I enjoy it, but it is not compared to how much interesting I find UX. because again, there's so much learning, constantly. And I feel like 1 or 2 years would not have been enough for me to even determine, like, what side of UX I want to go into. So I would have definitely tried, research, UI, core design, and kind of kept going with what I liked.
So I was looking at your study and also your career, and of course I know a little bit of your background. And one of the things that I've noticed is that one core element that comes back is structure.
Mhm.
What would you say to that?
That's very interesting observation. And to that, I would say, as a person, having gone, when you have been through different experience over time in your career, you kind of understand your own learning habits and interests that are different from the textbook learning. I'm a learner through and through. I love learning about new things and kind of constantly seeing what could be done different. Um, so I think UX kind of streamlined it. It allowed me to think in systems, optimizing those systems and how to understand people's habit constantly. And with civil, it is kind of like that, just a little slower. With engineering, it's a little slower. So in my own self, if I were to tell you that yes, structures is a kind of underlying, it's because I love seeing ideas come to life. I love seeing the how work we can do would impact the user itself. So yeah, I am a learner. I love systems, and I think that's why it has been structure kind of an underlying theme in different ways.
And my last question, even when you are a structural engineer, what would you advise a person who wants to transition to UX? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, in this environment, I think two core things someone needs is networking and work experience. That is what's going to get you foot in the door. So whether it's a boot camp or a master's or whatever program, I think you really need to see where can you get the most experience shown on your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, that's how a company is going to evaluate you. And the reason I say networking is because not just having the experience is not enough. You also need to be able to present your ideas. And, that is what you learn from other people and see what someone else does, how you can improve on that. So I would definitely say, see how you can get these two skills the best, and that would increase your chances of getting into UX. And yeah, I hope whoever wants to really are able to.
Sahar, thank you so much for your time today and the valuable insights that you've shared with us. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast and have any feedback, please leave a message. I wish you all the best in your journey and thank you for listening.
Thank you.